It is 7 o'clock. We're going to open the meeting. I am going to ask for one change of the tentative agenda. We have item number C, which is a resolution calling for the election on the question of whether or not to issue waterworks system revenue bonds. I'd like to move that down to under new business, under H as item number 2. I need a motion as such.
I'll make a motion.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay, item number B, item B, approval of minutes from regular meeting held on April 2nd, 2024. You guys had a chance to look over the minutes? Need a motion to approve those minutes for the regular meeting held April 2nd.
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Any changes? Nope. All in favor say aye. Aye. Passes. Thank you. Going on to item D, which is Karina Jones. You had you requested to talk about the bond issue.
Yeah, I would like to request again that the policy to apply 7 days before the meeting be reviewed and possibly omitted, as it would probably eliminate a lot of crossover between what's going to be addressed in the meetings, because the agenda is not posted when we have to request to speak. So as far as the bond issue that I asked some questions last month or earlier this month for the March meeting, I spoke with Mr. Twiggs afterwards, and he had mentioned that you guys had discussed postponing it because the last time it was discussed in an open meeting was going to be put up April of this next year. After speaking with Mr. Twiggs, he expressed, and you yourself, Jason, expressed that that was going to be put off. My question is when was that discussed? Because that was never discussed in a public meeting, because I've attended every public meeting that's happened since the bond issue got brought up.
I can't speak for Twiggs. I don't know. He's not here today, so he's not capable of answering that.
Okay, Mr. Branca, have you been apprised of that information, that the bond issue is going to be pushed out past April?
I mean, we've spoken about it.
And when was that? When did that happen? Gentlemen of the board, Mr. McCaffrey, I would encourage you all to look into polling. Look into polling of the board. These are all issues that should be discussed in open meeting.
The board does need to be polled with ayes and nays on the record.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yes.
Chapter 247.
And it seems from the conversation and my questions last month that there has been some polling being done outside of the open meetings. So
Not to my knowledge.
I don't know that they would let that be your knowledge.
The
So
polling-
I would just
In response to your question.
yeah, I would encourage
the
looking into that.
calling and bringing up of this resolution was at my request.
Right.
And I've asked the clerk to put it on the notice of meeting, and it is published on the notice of meeting to be discussed tonight.
Yes.
Now, I don't know whether they're going to pass it or not. They may not. It doesn't need to be passed tonight. It can be passed later.
Yes.
But it's a good idea to get it out in the public well beforehand, and that was the purpose of my requesting that it be considered tonight.
Yes. At the end of January, you were the one that brought up the meeting or the bond issue to be put on the ballot in April of next year. Since then, there's been no more discussion about the date of the bond issue being presented. But yet at the meeting last month, or earlier this month on April 2nd, there was discussion about pushing that forward, and more than one board member knew about that. So I'm just questioning when that was discussed and why it wasn't discussed in an open meeting.
I'm sorry, you said more than one board member knew what?
More than one board member knew
What?
that the bond issue, that you all were looking to move it forward instead of the April meeting, or the April election of next year.
Well, I don't know about who knew.
I know.
who
You
didn't,
weren't in
but
attendance, I was.
but
I've been in every one of them.
But I have recommended that it be moved forward.
That's not my question. My question is who all knew that the bond issue had been discussed to be moved forward past the April election next year.
Ma'am, I don't know the answer to that, nor do I know how many
I'm-
people eat Wheaties or Cheerios, but
I'm actually asking Jason this as the board president because he knew it and Mr. Twiggs knew it. Lenny, did you know that?
Y'all
Was there
argued
any
about it.
discussion? Okay, great, thank you.
let me answer that a minute. The bond issue election has not been moved forward. This board has to decide when to do it, and they're gonna discuss it tonight and decide where. I have recommended that it be done in February.
It's not what you're talking
It
There
has
was-
not been moved.
There was a statement made when I asked when the bond issue was gonna be presented, is that there has been discussion it was gonna get moved past and it may not be presented in the April board, or the April election of next year. That's my issue.
Well-
Not that it's getting moved forward, it's that there is polling of the board that's going on outside of open meetings.
Ma'am, I think you're wrong, but in any way.
They
at
just
this point-
admitted it.
At this point, we're here to listen to what you have to say, not to debate.
Exactly.
But you're saying some things that are mistaken.
I
He
have.
just said that he did.
Every meeting has been recorded, and if you would like
And you're
to,
recording at the moment.
I
so-
am recording
so
at the moment.
You have it and you'll find that I'm
Yes,
correct.
I do, and if you would like to see the video from last month,
I'm
to
not-
hear the discussion, that is my issue. It's not that the meeting, or not that the election, or the bond issue is not gonna happen in April. It's that what was stated here when I asked, when was the plan to have the meeting, or the election for the bond? There was discussion that it has been moved forward.
There is.
I would
There
would beg your forgiveness in that you have not been at that meeting. You were not at the
No,
meeting on April
There is
2nd.
no plan to have a bond election until this board votes on it.
It's
And
not the
it
point
is-
that I'm
It is not
asking.
set, it is a question that they'll discuss tonight and make a decision about.
That,
That is totally
Mr.
wrong.
McCaffrey, you are missing my point completely. That is not my point at all.
We're past the
Yeah.
5-minute mark.
So I would like to ask a few more questions to reclaim some of my time. And if you can't answer that tonight, what is the cost of chlorine per gallon? That may be a Mona or a John issue, and I can get that later, not an issue. I'd also have a question about the operations report and the systems report. There's some huge discrepancies from month to month about the current flushing. So what is flushing, and why would there be a huge difference of one month in January it was 19,000 and in February it was 233,000?
The reason that there would be a difference is because there was a lot more repair made. Flushing
Okay.
is something that we do after every repair. We have to flush the line, the
Gotcha.
service line, wherever the repair is made, we have to flush the line for a certain period of time to make sure there's fresh water
Okay.
inside the line, no contaminants.
So it's a result of the
It's a
leak
result of
repair,
repairs
okay,
being made.
okay. And then, is that counted in loss or is that counted in consumption?
It's kind of a loss.
Accounted for loss.
Accounted for less.
Okay.
That we know about.
Okay. And then, I'll follow up with Amanda about the loss because there was not a systems totals report in this month's packet, so. Thank you all for your time.
We're gonna move on to the financial report. Alan, this is your first time presenting a financial report to our board. We appreciate you coming on board with us and helping the new office staff, as well as our future potential bond issues and things going forward. Also helping us with the understanding of the proper rates that we should be charging. So I'm gonna turn it over to you for the financial report.
Okay, for those of you who haven't met me, my name is Alan Nippes. My firm's name is Nippes and Associates in Springfield. And we have been hired to help with the district's accounting and payroll and financial reporting and budgeting and rate analysis. And this is, I think, maybe the second time. I came down before last month and then we didn't have a quorum and so didn't present. And I'm presenting the first set of financial statements as of March 31st, 2024. And I think, I don't have copies for everybody, but there are some copies extra up here if somebody would like to have them, they can get them now or after the meeting, and I'll stay after the meeting to go over any questions, but I'll present the information to the board tonight. And so I think everybody up at these tables on the board has a copy of the financial statements, is that right?
Yes.
And so, I don't know, as I hear some of these questions and we kind of get more familiar with the district, this is a traditional balance sheet and profit and loss statement. and just in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. As I hear some questions about water loss and maybe cash flow monitoring and rate analysis, that we might present this in a slightly different way going forward that might be a little bit easier to kind of mend together the operations and the financial reporting so that we can coordinate revenues and expenses with water loss and figure out not just the absolute dollar values of the numbers, but how much revenue is coming in for every 1,000 gallons of water that you're selling, how much expenses, what the water loss percentage is. So the numbers won't change, the format and presentation will change. And we'll just kind of play that by ear. This right now is our first report we're presenting, and it's generally accepted accounting principles, which means we have a balance sheet that lists the assets and liabilities of the district. And I'm gonna start with that, and then we'll have a profit and loss that presents the revenue collected for last month and the operating expenses for that month. If we look at the balance sheet, I'm gonna go kind of quickly, but just please interrupt me as we go if there's questions. I'm not sure how you've done the financial report in the past, so just bear with me and interrupt me with questions. There are a variety of cash accounts of what you're looking at on the balance sheet and CDs, the total of which are $352,000 and change as of March 31st, 2024. I have put a column on there for last month, so you can see what the balance of these same accounts were a month before, $370,000. That gives you some insight that the cash balance went down. We probably had an operational loss for the month of March, and we'll talk about that when we see the profit and loss. But that is the district's total cash position at the end of March, $352,000 and change. The district had an estimated parts inventory at $39,000 and change, and accounts receivable, just amounts that have been billed to customers, but not yet collected, of $27,000 and change. The district has a list, a whole host of what we call them fixed assets, and that would be your wells, your standpipes, your water lines, etc. We do not have good historical records, nor does your auditor have good historical records for some of these fixed assets because they go back decades. And to the extent that we have to report on them, we're using your historical data from what we've gotten in the past. It is not a concern of ours in any way that we don't have accurate records going back decades, because we know they probably don't exist, and it doesn't have any bearing on what we're doing right now. It doesn't have, it has some bearing in that they're very aged and you probably need to do repairs and replace them, and John can speak to that. But as far as accounting, the infrastructure, the fixed assets, the wells, the towers, etc., are recorded at historical cost. And that doesn't have much meaning to the board of directors as it is trying to run the district on a day-to-day basis. What you pay for some of these things. So ideally, we would have records going back to decades. We haven't seen them. We've checked with your outside auditor and they don't have them. But it's not of any major consequence at all to the financial statements. Nevertheless, we have them recorded at a net cost of $489,000 based on the records we do have. That leaves this district with total assets of a little over $900,000, $908,727. That's cash, accounts receivable, inventory, and fixed assets. That is down a little bit from the month before, and that's, we talked about most of that decrease is due to the reduction in cash. Then we go on to liabilities and equity. I'm sorry I'm spending a little more time on this since this is the first report. And the district does not have any long-term debt of any kind right now, whether it's revenue bonds or private financing, and so you will not see that on the balance sheet. It's not a mistake, there's just no outstanding borrowing. So the only liabilities you will see would be temporary liabilities, and you'll see them on here. There's an account for federal payroll tax payable, FICA and federal withholding, and sales tax and privacy fees and customer deposits. That's your biggest single liability, and it's just customer deposits you have collected, and you can see those on your balance sheet. That totals $68,000, and you have some minor other liability accounts that are just timing differences. They might have existed at March 31st and they'll be paid in April, but no significant liabilities of any consequence for the district. And your total liabilities of $78,000 and change, if I'm reading that right, is predominantly the the customer deposits you have from your customers that they pay when they first connect and get onto the system. So if we had total assets of 908,000, total liabilities, those customer deposits of 78,000, the district has a total equity position of 830,000. And you haven't asked for my opinion on the adequacy of that equity. That would be your equity, your retained earnings, your net worth. Those terms are kind of synonymous. And the good news is you don't have any debt, and so you have a strong net worth. The bad news is, if it's bad news, to the extent that there need to be infrastructure repairs and improvements, and I suspect if I asked John, he would say there needs to be significant infrastructure improvements, we're not going to be able to do that with the existing funds that you have and the network that you have. Because while to all of us individually, that $830,000 of net worth is a lot of money, probably as we're here tonight, it's not a lot of money when we're talking about making infrastructure improvements. Those are so expensive, those need to be planned out, maybe there need to be revenue bonds. There needs to be some alternative source of financing. So I do think your balance sheet is in good shape for what it is, but it is not in good shape if we need to make major infrastructure improvements to the district. So are there any questions on the assets and liabilities? Overall, it's in good shape. It's just not strong enough to sustain major infrastructure improvements with the assets that you currently have. No questions on those? If you'll flip over then, does someone want to? You'll see the revenue and expense. And there's actually 2 pages. One is March as a standalone report, revenues and expense, and one is January through March, that would be year to date. And this is going to tie back in, not tonight necessarily, but in the coming months. Last month when we came, we presented a rate analysis that we performed after looking at the historical financial statements, not that we prepared, but your outside auditor prepared, and that your internal accounting staff prepared at the time. And we compared the revenues and expenses for that period, I think we did like a 3-year look back, using your auditor reports and internal financials, and we looked at your existing expense structure after you have made the changes you had, the recent hirings and the infrastructure changes that you have had inside your office. And we proposed a rate increase. The board of directors had already made, before we were hired, I think a month or so before we were hired, a rate increase of maybe a cost of living type rate increase. When we looked at it, and I wish I had brought it tonight, I'm sorry I didn't, I'll get it. I don't know if the board has it, but anyone who wants one, I'll get you a copy of it. And we don't think that one is going to be sufficient. And so we presented what we think the rates would need to be increased to make your existing financial expenditure structure reasonable and cash positive. And I'm doing it off the top of my head. I think we suggested raising the base rate to $26 and change, and the cost per 100 gallons to maybe 62 cents, somewhere in that range. I wish I had it in front of me. And so what we're going to see when we look at this profit and loss tonight and year to date is that you're going to have a net loss. You're going to have, and that in general is concerning. It's not as concerning to me tonight and for year to date because we already know, at least in our opinion, the rates as they are now are not sufficient to cover your operating expenses, and they're going to have to be improved. We kind of talked when we presented that informally and said, well, you just had a rate increase, we don't think it is sufficient. We could use a few months as we kind of get more familiar with the district, and the district has their current operations, to see how are they holding up, how are the rates that you've done, and see is our suggested rate adequate. Is it too much, is it too little? And so you're going to see a loss tonight that I'm going to go over. And my guess is when we get to June or July, we're going to make a more firm recommendation that either the rate analysis that we did and the recommendation we made should be implemented, or that's what we suggest to the board, or maybe we need to tweak it one way or the other based on how the next few months are. But all of that to say is you're going to see a net loss in here that is going to be a little bit concerning. You do have cash reserves to absorb a loss. We don't want to see a loss, and as soon as we're comfortable with what we're seeing and the results of these financial statements over the next few months, we'll make a more firm recommendation on that. rate analysis that we already did. So now going back to that profit and loss after just a little bit of background, and you will see total revenues driven almost exclusively by water sales. $30,000 in March compared to $32,000 in March the year before. Because the water rates are unpredictable and they're dependent on weather and usage, that variance is not enough to concern us. The concern on that is that may just not be enough revenue in general to support the expenses that you've got. And when we look at this, all the expenses, you can see all the expenses by type. And you're gonna see that the operating expenses total 51,000 and change, whereas they only total 21,000 a year before. There's several things going on that are making that increase. One of them is a one-time expense when you pay your annual property and liability insurance. You see that on there, insurance expense, liability and business for $10,331. That really is an expense that is for the rest of the year, for a 12-month period. So that it's not really indicative of a March expenditure, other than March was the month that was paid. So it's not an artificial expense, it's a real expense, but it's not one to get worked up about in terms of busting the budget, because it's for a 12-month period. So a lot of that's prepaid. We do see a lot of main repairs. This is one of our concerns. I'm just scrolling down, you guys can look at all the individual expenses. I'm hitting kind of the highlights that are noteworthy to us. The main repairs are $12,500. A year ago at this time, they were $5,900. That is a concern to us, but I'm not sure it's a concern to be panicked about. Number one, to the extent we're making repairs that's going to reduce water loss or improve the infrastructure of the district, those are probably necessary repairs that need to be made and expenditures that need to be incurred to get the district in a better spot going forward. And you can see that $12,492. Moreover, and this is part of what we want to see in the next few months, having an internal employee address these situations, I think in the long term, may end up being more cost effective than outsourcing. We had some concerns in our look back period of the last 2 or 3 years that all the outsourced costs that were done to improve or make repairs to the district was maybe not going to be financially feasible. So I do think it's too early to tell. This is really the first month we're looking at this. But I do have hope that for the district, having a director of operations fixing leaks as they come up and being more intimately familiar with the district overall, rather than just outsourcing one repair at a time without maybe the knowledge of the entire district. We're hoping that this will be maybe more expensive in the short term, but more cost effective and beneficial in the long term. With time, we'll have to tell and we'll have to see. But that was a significant increase from last year on the budget for this month. It was, in fact, the biggest single expense for the month, $12,492. We also had professional fees. I think now we have an attorney and accountant on board, and so that we have an increase from there that is just a legitimate expense that's going to have to be absorbed, at least for as long as we're healthy, and giving accounting, payroll, and budgeting help, and the attorney is providing the same. And then we see a big expense in salaries and wages. And as we know, we have a change in the way that the employee structure has been. There's a director of operations, there's an office manager, and there's a clerk that are filling critical functions for the district, but that also costs money in terms of payroll and payroll taxes that has to be paid. And so when we see that $51,000 that I said are operating expenses, and we compare it to the $30,000 of revenue, you do in fact have a $21,000 loss. 10,000 of that is because of the insurance, so that drags that loss down, practically speaking, or realistically speaking, to 10,000. But it is still a $10,000 loss that is probably legitimate. It's not realistic to think that there will not be repairs and maintenance and required in the coming months, and it's not realistic to think there'll be a reduction in payroll salary because we've got these new positions. So that's where the rate analysis is going to have to be married together with the operating results, and we'll make a more firm and final recommendation on that every 9 months. In the next 3 months, we're just going to monitor this and see. The only other source of income was a little bit of interest income on the bank accounts, and that was a little less than $600. And that's where you got to your net income, or really a net loss of $20,000. Are there any questions on March? I probably won't, yes, ma'am.
On the, main repairs, at what point do you consider, them to be a capital improvement rather than an expense?
It's a good question. It's a judgment call. Right now, our main concern, it's kind of a pun of sorts, main concern, is making sure we're addressing the cash flow needs of the district. And so at this point, in general, by the way, to answer the question directly, an expenditure of $2,500 or more that provides an economic benefit for more than 12 months. That's the definition of an asset that we use, and we would capitalize that as an asset and depreciate it. We're a little, go ahead.
I think that some of those main repairs would fall in that category, on this particular.
I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Our concern on doing that right now is when we capitalize something and treat it as an asset, it takes it off of this profit and loss, and it puts it over on the balance sheet, and then we recognize depreciation. But the depreciation might be for a period of 10 years, or 7 years, or 25 years. And so what that does is it artificially decreases your expenses. And right now, we want to be sure we have a very good handle on what your expenses are, because we need to get a very good handle on what your cash outflows are. Because that's ultimately what we're using to set our recommendation on what your rate should be. And if we have a period of time where there is going to be potentially significant repairs and maintenance, even if at the end of the year we consult with your auditor and we decide A, B, C, and D need to be reclassified as assets and depreciated, we will do that. But in the short term, there are no outstanding loans, and you're having to fund all of these repairs with your own cash. And so right now, we are being a little bit liberal with those expenses to be conservative and make sure that we have a good handle on your cash outflows. Otherwise, doing so could potentially overstate your income or understate your loss and inhibit our ability to give good rate suggestions going forward. So you are right about maybe capitalizing some of those expenses, but there is a danger to doing that right now because it could understate our loss or overstate our income.
I could see where it would be beneficial for the rates, to take that into consideration, but it was just that it kind of makes the assets look bad in the fact that you do have, improvements that are out there that are going to be there for that.
Well, we will reserve.
At the end of the year would be fine.
Or it may be sooner, but we will reserve the right to reclassify some of those things. We're not going to do it probably in this interim period when we think doing so may be dangerous to the cash flow analysis. And that's the reason why we haven't done it now. And it's just really to protect the district. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, you did.
Are there any other questions from the board on that? That is an accounting question that's a very valid one, and there's a reason why we're slightly departing from it right now, is because there's a more pressing need, and that's determining what the cash outflows are. And depreciating those would mask that. Are there any other questions on the revenues or expenses? If you flip the page, I won't go through this in as much detail. This is the exact same report, it's just for a 3-month period rather than a 1-month period. And you'll see essentially the same thing. You have $93,000 in revenue, so you can see the revenue is about the same every month for the first 3 months of 2024. And you can scan through those expenses and you will see about the same pattern that you saw in March. The biggest single expense is maintenance and repairs, and as Mona said, some of that probably is legitimate capitalized expenditures or asset purchases. We're not doing that yet. And the second biggest expense would be salaries and wages, and then it's followed by utilities. That pattern is not uncommon for most of the districts that we do. Those are typically the 3 biggest expenses that you see: maintenance and repairs, salaries, and utilities. So we're not surprised or alarmed by that. We do note that there is a $33,000 loss for the year, and while we know there are cash reserves right now to handle that, we do need to get, in our opinion, a rate suggestion to you that will make up that shortfall. We would like to look at it a couple more months to make sure we have a good handle on what that is. And right now, you're averaging a loss for the year of $10,000 a month. That could change dramatically, or it might not change dramatically, in the council, so we'll just have to wait and see. All right, are there any questions? Is that too long, Jason? Any questions on revenues and expenses or assets, or any other questions about the capitalization of things? Bill, did you have any questions, or stuff I forgot?
I think you covered it.
Okay, well, that's it for me, Jason, unless you have specific questions.
In the past, prior to bringing you on and prior to our office staff changing, we had basically breakdown of the disbursements for the month of March, and we would approve those at the end of the meeting, or in this process of meeting. My question, I guess, would probably be for Bill, do we need to be approving those disbursements in the exact dollar amount for the month of March like we had been in the past?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Do we need to be approving the disbursements in the exact amount for the month of March like we had been in past meetings before we brought the accounting firm on?
Yes, it's a good idea to do that.
Okay. So what we need to know is the total amount of disbursements for the month of March, and I believe they are in the balance sheet.
Yeah, there will be in that, the profit and loss that you guys will see on, Amanda actually asked me for this, and I misunderstood her question, so I'm sorry, Amanda, that's what you were asking, isn't it? Okay, if you look at page 1 of your profit and loss, it'll be the third page in your group. That's that $51,000 I was referring to, your total operating expenses, and you can see them all broken down by category.
Okay, so I'd like to see that broken out possibly in the future.
We'll just probably bring, Amanda did ask me for it, I misunderstood what she was
I
asking.
related to her, she related to you.
Okay,
So.
and then I just dismissed it because I thought what you were looking for is the financial statement. I will bring a list of every check that was written, so you can see each check and each payee, and then you can.
And she gives us a copy of every bill that was paid, without a doubt, but I'd like to see it broke down in the form that we used to use.
We'll bring that.
Okay.
I'll figure out what that was.
So for right now, I would entertain a motion to approve the disbursements of $51,396.07, unless you guys want to wait until the next month, we need to approve it this month.
Man, I'm sorry.
I'll make the motion.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any additional discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Operations report, John Dowdy. We'll start with you.
All right, I guess you guys didn't get the operations report,
We have copies in front of us.
Okay, well, that's my I was talking about.
Oh, Mona's, yeah, we have Mona's.
Okay, all right, good. So, unless you guys got any questions about it, I think the biggest thing is from February to March, the drop in usage. When we would normally be seeing quite a raise in the usage, we're down 1.3 million gallons from the months of February to March. Just wanted to point that out. If you guys got any questions about anything else that's on the numbers report, as far as flushing that was done or leaks that were repaired. Nothing. So basically, we had a lot less pop-up leaks. As a matter of fact, right before this meeting, we had 2 leaks popped up, and that's the first 2 we've had popped up in 2 months. So unfortunately, we're going to get them repaired as soon as possible. But we went from an average of 6 a month to 2 in the last 2 months. So that we're doing quite a bit better. So my report is kind of touching on stuff that we touched on last month. I know there's not been a lot of time between the meetings, but I wanted to go back to the Irish Hills, and I put on there that we did go in there and do the work I talked about the last time. We installed an isolation valve at O'Leary, which didn't really have anything to do with the leaks there. It's just a way to isolate the main that's on that side of the road, because we had to shut down the whole system and make repairs on that short section. So we installed an isolation valve there to be able to do that. I did install an isolation valve at the spillway. So we did talk about that in length at the last meeting, because we believe that there's a leak in the bottom of on the other side of the pond right there in that area. So with the current machinery that we had, I tried to follow the main to try to determine exactly where it went, because of the steepness there, the backhoe, I couldn't do it. I couldn't go any further. I went as far as I could, exposed the main, trying to figure out an exact direction. It does seem like it's going off into the woods, but I couldn't take the backhoe over the hill. It's just too steep. So we're either gonna have to rent a piece of equipment, a mini excavator, something that's safer to traverse down there, or have a contractor go down there and fix that leak. But with that being said, I did install a valve there to be able to isolate from the spillway further down, to isolate that small section. And then I had a conversation with the homeowner there because there was some reservations about us going in there and doing that work the last time. And he understood our position and what we had to do to go in there. So I told him that we were gonna go in and we were gonna clear the right of way as best as possible. And we were gonna go in there and try to spot dig to find the main and make the repair on the main as it goes through there. And then maybe in the future, if we do confirm that it's going through the bottom of the holler like that, have some conversations about rerouting it or whatever needs to be done to try to get it out of there, because it's just a bad spot for it to be in general. And while we were out there doing this in Irish Hills, we had there was a small leak on a service line that we made while we was there, while we installed those two valves in that area. And then moving down to the tower well, I think I told you the last time that I removed the old booster pump shed there and destroyed it. I removed that debris from the well site, installed all new LED lighting in the well room because there was just one light bulb in there. Wasn't enough room to really do any work in the dark. Finished the installation of the chlorine analyzer. Currently, I am going back and forth with the programmer from Hydraulic, and they're working on the communications from the new booster pump panel to the current US filters panel we have, the communications between the two and what type of parameters we want in there, what we want to monitor from the booster pump to there. And so the conversation we're having right now is them coming in. Of course, they're going to hook up the RACO unit. They're going to hook up the continuous chlorine analyzers. I did talk to them about giving us a quote for another RACO unit for the office well, because it doesn't make sense to have the analyzer there and not have something there to monitor that. So I'm having a conversation with them about that. And then there's a lot of things like the level transducer and the ground storage currently doesn't work. It's supposed to communicate with the US filters panel, but it doesn't. So we're talking about having them come down in 2 stages, to come down and do what was in their first quote with the continuous chlorine analyzer and the RACO unit that we already have, hooking all that stuff up and getting it operational, and then doing some testing on the level probe and the ground storage to try to figure out why it's not communicating with the filters panel, if it's bad, or if there's a communication problem, to try to get that resolved, and then maybe come down at a second time to fix whatever's wrong with the level transducer, and then install another RACO unit in the well should we decide to go ahead and put that in. So we're going back and forth right now to try to get that scheduled, but he should be finishing the programming up pretty soon. Today the conversation was what alarm parameters we were going to have for the booster pump, so he's finishing that up now. And then another thing that I did was there's now fire extinguishers, rechargeable fire extinguishers in every booster pump room and in the well house and on the tower property. And they're, I would suggest in the future that we set up a company to come in and check them on a yearly basis. And they're all rechargeable, so that can be done on all those. And that also was done at the office well too. And then Complete Restoration come down and did their inspection of the ground storage and the tower. And they had a few recommendations on theirs.
That was one of the items that lands on main repair, correct?
Yes. I would assume that's where we're going. So speaking to the leaks, like I said, there hasn't been a tremendous amount of new leaks. We've repaired several old ones, but there was a leak found at, I put it in there wrong, it says Lakeshore and Christina. It's actually Northwoods and Christina. There was another large leak found there. It was the 4-inch main. There was a 6-inch crack in the 4-inch main. And so, I mean, conservative estimate on estimated loss for that crack would have been 1 million gallons a month, just that one leak by itself. We will, again, as we move through the months, we really can't, it's bad that it's not bad, but that we had the meeting at this time. If we had the meter readings done, we'd be able to see the drop in percentage of, we need to see the percentage of sold water compared to the percentage amount pumped. And until we get that, we don't know real percentages of loss. So we'll have that in the next coming weeks. At the next meeting, we'll know what it was for this last night. 23 Northwoods, there was a service line repair. When we did both of these leaks at the same time, the same day. 51 Irish Hills, I mentioned that already. We did the service line repair there. 9 Skyline, so, I spoke to about this last time too, that we made a large repair on a water main at Redbud and White Rock. And then, there was a house there at Redbud that I moved. There's a 2-inch and a 4-inch main that runs side by side. The 2 inches is an old galvanized steel, very deteriorated. I'm assuming that the reason that the 4-inch was put right beside it is the intention was as the services need to be replaced, they would move them to the 4-inch. So while I was working in those areas, I actively moved those services to the 4-inch. And so I abandoned the section of 2-inch from Skyline to Redbud. That section of 2 inches abandoned. And then, so I went to 9 Skyline, which is on the corner of where those 2 mains come up, and moved him from the 2-inch to the 4-inch. And then we have the residents at 4 Pine that I have currently on our schedule to move them from the 2-inch to the 4-inch, and there'll be 300 foot of 2-inch galvanized main that we can abandon. That we already have the shutoff valves on. We installed them long ago when we were making repairs there. So all we'll have to do is move that service, shut that valve, and then, I mean, the last time I dug it up 60 foot, and there was a half a dozen leaks in it. They were small leaks, but that's the way galvanized steel leak. But anyway, that's why I put that on there to make you guys aware. Yeah, yeah.
He was updating that.
Yeah, we update everything as we go, so, yeah, yeah. Yeah. And then, Redbud and Pioneer, I dug in that area. We had some water surfacing there, and so I was digging there, for a leak investigation. But it's also an area where there was no ice, or the isolation was quite a ways away from that area, and it's a dead-end line that goes up there a few hundred feet. So I dug there for a leak investigation and then installed an isolation valve while I was in that area. Same thing in 49 O'Leary, which I mentioned already, installed an isolation valve there. Moving down to the other work and future work, we did 8 yards repaired. I tried to go back and do all the yard repairs for all the leaks that we had done in the past months. Got all those done. Raised a meter pit at 30 Skyline that had been buried in the yard from landscaping. And then I'm sure probably multiple people saw me, but at the corner at 13 Skyline, the sharp curve, there's been we talked about the leak that's coming out at White Rock and Skyline forever. So I made some real investigations to try to figure out how the main lies through there and find that leak. So our map is not correct. Our map shows the line coming around the corner and then crossing over, going directly to the PRV. That's not how it lays there. On top of the hill, it crosses Skyline and goes to the other side and then goes to the PRV. And I found the leak right in the middle of the road. It's sitting right on top of the city sewer main. There's a large leak there. So as soon as I was able to identify where the main went, I put the listening device on the road and I found it really fast. It's galvanized steel. Everything coming up to it and everything leaving it is PVC, but the line that crosses the street is all galvanized steel. So coming up here in the near future, we will be digging that up and we'll be replacing it all the way across the
Do you have any indication of how big of a leak it is?
I don't. So the line's only 2 inch and it's galvanized, so it's going to be just based on the sound. I'm going to say it's probably a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch hole in the line. It's a large leak, but it makes sense that it would be surfacing at Redbud and White Rock because it's falling into the road cut where the city sewer's at, and it's following that city sewer, the gravel right down that city sewer trail, and just finding the easiest way out down there at the bottom. So I'm not going to promise that that's going to fix it, but by all indications, that's the only leak that I know of above that spot. So we'll be looking to get that fixed in the coming months, or coming weeks, I should say. We're currently waiting on road cut permits to do that. And then there was another one here at not 2 Elm. There's a 2-inch main that crosses Elm, the same type of situation. It's a 2-inch galvanized steel main, and I identified a leak there. It's not in the middle of the road, but close enough. So we will be cutting and digging across the road and replacing that all the way across the road too. Yes, and sleeving it as it crosses the road to protect it in the future. And then I had, I spoke about 4 Pine already. We're removing them from the 2-inch, put on the 4-inch so I can abandon that 2-inch main. Central Power Systems come out for the last time and did the scheduled maintenance on the generator. I spoke to them about, because it was the last scheduled maintenance for the contract that we had with them, and I spoke to them about getting us quotes to renew their contract or quotes to see what their contract would be going forward. We also received some from A&J Power Systems when they quoted us for the panel replacement for the transfer switch. So when we get those, we'll present them at the next meeting to move forward with maintenance for the generator. some of the recommendations in the long-term planning committee's plan, I thought were great ideas, so I did install a keypad lock on the well side at the office well. And then I mentioned before, I installed fire extinguishers wherever necessary. There's multiple ones at the office well, and then one in every room at the tower well. And then I just made some notes here, stuff that's not on here. I just wanted to talk to you about the new meter that I told you that we ordered for the tower well to replace the one that's been there forever. Just arrived today, so we'll be getting it installed just as soon as possible. I'm still trying to go back with Mueller Systems. We found a couple of the pressure transducers that I talked to you guys about at the last meeting about putting on the PRVs. We found a couple of companies that do them. One company really only has one that will really work for our application. The other one was kind of a Bluetooth type. You had to be within 1,500 feet of, and that's not going to work. We want one that communicates cellularly and will obviously send us an alarm, you know, if something happens. So I'm still waiting on exact pricing, but it looks like they're going to be about $1,000 a piece, and then there's going to be $130 per year cell fee for their communications. So I asked them
$130 a year for each one.
for each one, yes. I asked them, they said it's going to be about $1,000, and I said I need exact pricing. I can't do about $1,000, so I'm still waiting for exact pricing for them. And then, I mentioned that.
And that would give you a real-time indication of a pressure failure with the PRV.
Yeah, so they also collect data too, so we'd be able to see data on pressure influxes, anything like that, but we would set parameters on it. If I wanted it to be between 60 and 80 PSI, if it goes to 81 PSI, we'd immediately get an alarm, and we could at least go check on it. Even if it was not, I mean, it shouldn't ever surpass what we have it set at. So it would, just one time, like I said, the last meeting, if it saves one leak, it's already paid for itself. But I will mention, since I put in the additional PRVs that we have in town, so I talked a few meetings ago about the one that I installed at the bottom of Hilltop on the 2-inch main, because that 4-inch main stops and turns to a 2-inch. So we did have a failure on Hilltop's PRV. It blew a line, and so when it blows a line to its CRD controls, it just lets full water pressure through. So we were getting 200 PSI at the bottom of the hill. So when that goes through that PRV, it goes to the new PRV that I installed. We did not have a leak. The PRV was down for, I think the gentleman that called about it said it might have been down for a day or two. That water was coming out of the pit. And when I got down there, I mean, the way we knew in the past is there was a leak. And so then I would go right to the PRV thinking that there was a problem with the PRV. And so that second PRV protected that line. We had no leaks when that larger PRV failed. And then one more thing I wanted to mention is we still have the last PRV that I ordered to install in the Edgemont area to try to get the pressures down at Walnut and Cedar, the lower extremities. And I was just talking to Jerry about trying to figure out some elevations there to find out correct positioning to just put it in the right spot so somebody doesn't get too little pressure. So we'll be working on that in the coming weeks as well.
Anybody have any questions for John?
Got some questions?
Anybody have any questions for Mona? Mona, did you have anything to add?
No, I pretty much given it to John to present all together.
All right, we're gonna move on to old business. We had talked about the rate study a little bit, Alan. I know that you had, when we didn't have a quorum, you had kind of went over your philosophy on waiting a few months to find out, get a more of a base understanding of our expenses, given that we had so many changes. Do you have an idea of when you would want to present that rate study?
Well, I would say certainly no later than July, but I would like to reserve the right to do it sooner. If we see next month and the month, if we're seeing some consistency pretty soon and we understand that consistency is gonna represent the new norm, there's no sense delaying it longer than it needs to be delayed.
Okay.
If we're convinced that the rate, it needs to happen soon. So I would say no later than July and based on the results sooner than July.
I'm gonna put you a little bit on the spot. So, how many other water districts or sewer districts have you worked with on rate, setting the rate adequate to
We
cover
work with
expenses?
about 16 of them right now on a regular monthly basis, and we probably add another 10 to 12 on that, and we just do semi-annual and annual work. So a fair amount. Certainly not every water district in Missouri, but quite a few of them.
Anybody have any questions on our plan to move forward with the rate study no later than July to get a good baseline on where we're at? Okay. On the information that you gave us from the previous meeting that we didn't have one packet, kind of breaks it down on how you came up with those numbers, and I think it was well thought out, and other board members have gotten copies of that, so I'm sure we'll be on the same page when it comes time for you to present. Okay, the item that we moved from C down to G would be, or I'm sorry, we're supposed to go to new business. I apologize. I moved to H, didn't I? Okay, so we do have Bob Williams. Is Bob Williams here? Hey, Bob, how are you doing?
Good.
So I see that you have an application to join our board, and I see that you're not in District 5. I contacted the attorney and checked. Since you are in District 1, and you'd be filling a District 5 spot, come the next election, next cycle, if somebody from District 5 chose to apply, you would then either have to run for District 1 against somebody in District 1 position, or just relinquish your spot to them. But can you talk to the board a little bit about why you want to join?
Well, I'm recently retired, and I thought it'd be nice to maybe get the mind moving again a little bit. I've enjoyed retirement for the past 2 years, and wouldn't mind getting involved with something.
Gotcha. Well, Bob, this is the first time I've met you. When I knew that you had filled out an application, I've been here 24 years. I know quite a few people in town. I checked out the name and said, no, I'm not sure I know that gentleman, but I think getting involved in the community is a good thing. I've been involved in the community for many, many years in various different aspects, and definitely appreciate somebody wanting to give back to the community that they live in. So, me personally, I think you know, if you want to serve on the vacated spot for District 5, I'm all for it, and I would entertain a motion to approve Bob Williams for District 5 position until we can find somebody from District 5.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any additional discussion on the motion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, Bob. To be involved in our next meeting, I would strongly recommend that you get to know all these people to my left, and we got some really good people here working for the Water District, and they will definitely be able to answer any questions you have. If not, get a hold of me, and I'll be happy to talk with you about anything too. So, kind of get you up to speed.
All right, appreciate it.
Okay, next item is the resolution calling for the election on the question whether to issue waterworks system revenue bonds. I want to talk with our engineer for a minute, because we had done a study on what needed to be done basically for major upgrades into the water system, and I believe that study was dated 2017. And we did apply for a grant and updated some of those numbers, but it is of your recommendation that we start fresh and do a new study. Is that correct?
Certainly, can't be hurt by that, other than the cost of doing the study.
Okay. Is there any way to save costs by using the existing information in the 2017 study?
I think a lot of the existing information is still valid. Sitting down with John and Mona to see if they think there's anything critical would be good. But I think a lot, if not all of the recommendations for something study are still valid, because they're really focused on supply and storage and transmission from those new supplies and storage up in a new area of the district that hasn't changed in the last 7 years.
Do you recall the dollar amount for the recommended upgrades in 2017 dollars? And then I know you did an update when we were looking on elevated water for the grant. Can you give us an educated guess on where you think we need to go in today's numbers for, because we're getting ready to talk about the possibility of getting approval for bonds from the public in order for us to borrow money for major upgrades. I know obviously we're going to have to dig into the numbers specifically for the different stages of these upgrades, which at that point, the bonds would be issued, in the amounts that we would need, but get an idea of where we need to set the bond request to the public. Do you have an idea without diving fully into the study, you got an educated guess on where we need to be?
Yeah. Did you want that evolution of cost for
Yes.
2017? In 2017, our report, our study estimated about $2.3 million in construction costs, and that was for a new well house, a new elevated storage tank, some water line transmission improvements, a significant amount of water line replacement, existing well pump upgrades in order to get your existing wells to pump up to this new storage tank that we're proposing, as well as the abandonment of the abandonment of the end of useful life items that currently reside on the storage tank side. They currently So that was about $2.3 million in 2017 costs for construction, putting in just some general industry standard percentages of construction for the non-construction costs associated with surveying, engineering, permitting, bidding, construction phase administration, legal and easements, as well as a 15% contingency. Brought that number up to $3.1 million. So it was a $3.1 million set of complete infrastructure recommendations in 2017. When we applied for ARPA grant consideration in 2022, those numbers were updated. And of course, that was approximately one pandemic later and supply shortage and crisis later, and those same improvements then ended up being estimated to cost construction and non-construction costs about $5.1 million. A lot of that was due to the cost of the tank, the elevated storage tank going up, as well as really everything else as well that went up. I just got a fresh number from a elevated tank manufacturer for what to budget for the same tank in today's dollars, or actually in 2026 for 2026 construction, and it went up another $400,000. Their same budget, instead of budgeting 1.8 million, budget 2.2 million. So I think that $5.1 million in 2022 dollars, by the time a bond issue gets passed and you put all this out to bid, I think you're looking at a minimum of a $6 million project, minimum. The conferences, the water conferences that I've been to recently have supported the viewpoint that this is not an inflation bubble that's going to pop and things are going to go back down to pre-pandemic prices. What we're being told is that you'll never do anything cheaper than you do it today. The inflation is here to stay for quite some time. So to do the recommendations outlined, I think we're looking at least a $6 million investment for construction and non-construction costs. Is what the floor is for those. The ceiling is probably up, 8, 9, 10 million.
So, Mr. McCaffrey, one of the things that you and I talked about when we were talking about the bond issue and where you set the bonds is you basically you ask the public for the ability to borrow the bond amount. You usually run the bond amount exceeding what your expectations are on the repairs, in case you do have overruns, in case there's future repairs down the road. What would your recommendation, knowing that we're looking at roughly $6 million in major upgrades that would be going out for bond issue, would you suggest setting the bond at a significantly higher amount, like $7 million, something along those lines, and we borrow as needed, or issue the bonds as needed?
There are several problems. eligible for grant money. And, well, that's one of the beauties. Another beauty is that its income is not subject to taxation, so we can hold the cost down if grants are available. We can hold the overhead down because there's no taxation on income. Another beauty is that, unlike a private company, there's no obligation to pay dividends to shareholders. Another beauty is that because of the loans that are available from the federal government, either with HUD money that's distributed by the state or by federal money through the USDA, the interest rate on loans for rural water districts is usually in the vicinity of 1 point less than that of private industry. So the borrowing should be cheaper. Another advantage of the rural water district is that the federal loans and some state loans, the period of payback can be extended to 35 years, but no payback the first 2 years, except for interest. Usually in private financing, they start talking to you in terms of 20 years because they're a little more certain about the interest rates for that period. But if we can qualify for federal loans, we can go as 35 at a fixed rate without a variable arrangement, and the interest rate would be locked in. Those are the advantages. Your problem with how much you set your bond election for, if you do that, and look at this for a moment, the time of the election. You can call this election whenever you want to, but it has to be one of the 4 election days that are available under the Missouri statute. And we had initially suggested it be put off for a long period of time to be sure everybody could get together. You need a new study of what's needed. But anyway, my office initially suggested a long term for it. But because of increasing costs, I think it's foolish to put it off. So I have recommended to the president of the board that the board consider, where's the ordinance? Running, what do we got here? Okay. We recommended that you set it out and call the election for November the 26th. That is a municipal election day, and the beauty of that particular election is that it's likely that your question will be the only one on the ballot. So when people go to vote for it, it'll be people that are interested in yes water or no water. And it won't be those who go to an election who really don't know what's on the ballot. And when you see something that has to do with borrowing money, people often assume that it's payable by taxes. These bonds are not payable by taxes. They can't be paid by tax money. They have to be paid with revenues from the water system. And we can extend it out to the federal financing of 35 years to make it as palatable as possible. So those advantages are available, but I have changed my recommendation to the board that you hold the election more quickly than you could otherwise put it off. Now, as to the amount, I'm getting back to your question, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Talking in circles, but back to your question about when to have the election. The amount of the election, excuse me. I have had water and sewer districts do things, they're very similar for financing, but they do things in different ways. One sewer district that I represent passed a bond election for $20 million, thinking it would cover 20 years of growth. what you think you're gonna need in 5 years or 10 years or whatever. But these elections are time consuming. They are expensive now because we used to have these elections with a few judges and election clerks and borrow election boxes from the courthouse, and you can't do that anymore. You've got to do it formally under the Missouri election law, and it's expensive. So there is a concern whether you should have your election for a minimal amount or for a sum to carry several years of borrowing. Now, let's assume you do the bond election to authorize $7 million. Now, you're not issuing bonds. You're not borrowing money. You're getting approval from the voters that your board of directors, when they need funds for a project, they have authority to borrow it. And in your case, the loan should be either from the federal government or federal money through SRF, because it'll be cheaper, and there's the possibility, although no certainty, of receiving grant money. Now, when you issue your bond, when you get your authority on bonds, your engineer is going to have to do a new study here, and he's going to have to get DNR approval on it. You are lucky because DNR knows this particular engineer, and he was formerly employed by the federal government to review plans of other engineers. And the quality and the know-how of this particular engineer, I'm delighted to see you have him aboard. So I don't think he will take as long as maybe he's also got this other study to bring some points out of. But most engineers take a year to do a preliminary plan. And it's going to take a period of time when you get the preliminary plan done to get DNR approval. Our engineer here is going to have to approve your plans. The engineer for the DNR is going to have to approve them. And then, if that weren't enough, the engineer for the United States government in Columbia, Missouri is going to have to approve them. So, and most engineers put their scent on the papers with some little thing that they want done, and usually something. And there'll be a few changes and a few improvements, no matter who does the plan. But I would be surprised, even on blank speed, if we can get a DNR approved plan within probably, and I'm sure criticize this, please, if you can, but I would guess that it'll take us a year and a half. And then we're not done. The time that we have to delay and risk further inflation, the federal government or the state government will demand that the project be bid to public bidders and to construction companies on public bid. And to do that, we have to advertise it for a month. And there has to be a time then for the receipt of the bids. And as if they haven't taken long enough, at that point, the federal government or the state government, whichever we're getting financing, and could be both, they have to then receive the bids, look at them, and decide whether to approve them. Now, they're usually it's nice to assume that that'll be done quickly, but they have other projects to worry about, and so it'll probably be 30 days to 60 days before we get their approval, so that you can go to construction. At that point, you've got to award a contract to the low bidder, or the bidder that you decide is the most responsible and responsive bidder under the new law. It used to be lowest and best, now it's responsible and responsive under the law. So you have a little bit of leeway, but the federal government will be very disappointed if you don't go with the lowest bidder, if that bidder is able to be insured, and we require some really formidable insurance, and if that bidder is able to make a corporate surety bond for all costs associated with the project, and that has to be done. So it's an educated guess. I've done over 100 of these projects. It's an educated guess that you're probably gonna be a year and a half to 2 years before you're gonna be able, more likely 2 years before you're gonna be able to go construction. And I invite any criticism, but very, very frankly, even with the best engineering and the best administrative and legal work, it's probably gonna take 2 years, and we're gonna have the cost of inflation along with it. So for that reason, I reversed myself on suggesting you wait to make sure everybody was happy with the project, which was my original thinking, because I know there's some difficulty here about what to do and how to do it. And I initially was suggesting a long time for consideration, but I have now recommended that we go in November of this year, which we can do, we have time to do it. But you're gonna have to set the amount. Now, when you set this amount, if you set the amount at 7, the engineer may be lucky and he may get you, we've had projects that have had 75% grant. Now, that's a crazy situation where you've got a broke community and a very low income community that has eligibility for those kind of grants. And you don't have that here because this area doesn't have that population of folks in the lower income rate. We also had situations where the United States government has funded all of the loans that were applied for that year. And at that time, all the states have to pay back to the federal government unused, they have to release their allotment of funds back to the federal government. And at that point, if those funds are available and you're standing in line and you have a worthwhile project, they will sometimes finance you unexpectedly, and all of a sudden you get a call and say, we're gonna fund your project, you're good to go. We do not know at the moment what's gonna be available in grants for us, because this is a reasonably well-to-do area, and we don't know what funds are gonna be available. The state government has had all kinds of money to give away in grants the last couple of years. However, we have no assurance it'll still hold later. So, if I tell you that I recommend 7 or 10 or $15 million bond issue, bear in mind, you're not borrowing a dime, because you don't know if you'll get any grant money, and you'll only borrow the amount of money taken to pay for the project. You're not gonna go put any money in the bank to use later or for whims and that kind of thing. So we don't know what grant will be available for you, and it's uncertain what your cost will be bid 2 years from now. But your engineer fears that with the inflation going the way it is, that cost may be in the vicinity of $7 million. Now, let's say you do a $7 million bond and we bid the job. Your engineer will probably bid this in what are called deductible alternatives. And there will be portions of the contract, if he does that you don't have to award. And so, if we look at it and we think the rate is going to be higher than our customers want to pay, you may decide to build half the project, or 2/3 of it, or 1/3 of it, that are absolutely necessary. I had a long talk this afternoon with your engineer about what he thinks needs to be replaced. And I had no idea that you were in the condition that you are, or had so many pipes that need to be replaced and enlarged. I also had today a discussion with the mayor of, an engineer I owe, with the mayor of Kimberly City, and they are very, they're blessed with one thing. Back when the president of this board was mayor of Kimberly City, he got the city to buy a tract for public utilities. It happens to be the highest point in Branson that's flat. Branson, I mean Kimberly City that's flat. And it is the perfect site for a huge water tower that would have the capacity up in the air to pressurize the system, not only good right now, but good for expansion in the future. And if the district ever is enlarged for expansion to carry other areas and other businesses in the Kimberly City area. The mayor spoke to us about businesses that need and want power flow requirements. I know that there are a lot of residents here that want power flow requirements. It is true that rural water districts normally never provide power flow requirements. I do represent districts that do. One of them serves the north half of Branson, Missouri. And it is possible, but it takes a lot of money to build it, and you've got to have massive overhead storage to do it. So, how much you borrow here, I've prepared the ordinance and called the election. Now, bear in mind, it doesn't borrow any money. It just simply says you guys can borrow money if and when your board votes to do it, and if and when it's available. And it doesn't say how much you borrow. It says you've got authority. It's kind of like going to mom and dad and finding out that I've got authority for up to $10 to buy stuff at the sports shop or whatever. And it's giving you authority up to that figure. So, I usually recommend that you borrow more than you think you're gonna need. And if you think further improvements, you've got a real problem here with this district. You're serving a major part of Kimberly City. You are not serving the major business entities in Kimberly City. And they need service, and they need fire flow protection. And the likelihood is that no private company that has to pay dividends and has to pay tax on their income is going to venture the expense of building a system anything like you have or are contemplating. And so the best opportunity, in my opinion, from my 35 years of experience doing this, is that the best bet for Kimberly City and the biggest hope for Kimberly City is rural water district improvements. But you're not going to be able to do it in phase one. You're going to do a phase one here that basically is to get yourself a new towers and get rid of this standpipe that you have to pump into. And so get rid of this standpipe and have pumps adequate to push that water up into that tower where it can serve the entire area both now and expansions in Kimberly City, if that's what's decided later for phase 2 or 3 or 4. So when you do this bond election, you kind of need to think about whether there is going to be a need to try to get service in outside the community or improve service within the community. And so it costs so much and takes so much time, and with inflation, I personally think it's a good idea to get your bond election for more than you need or would possibly need. I think you should consider $10 or $12 million authority because it may be available, and when grant money is available, you need to be able to grab it while it's there. So your decision here is a tough one. You're going to have to guess about how much to do it and how much to do for your election and what date to do it. I'm recommending that we step up to date to this election that we have here on this document.
So you have to have a bond issued before you qualify for state or federal funds.
You have to be able to borrow money, and you have no authority to borrow until the voters have approved it. And the agencies that provide financing for you, they can't give you a grant unless you have partial financing for the parts you have to build on your own cost. And if you don't have that money in the bank, you've got to be able to borrow it, and the usual way is revenue bonds. The voters won't approve a tax bond,
Correct.
but they will approve revenue bonds, and a simple majority is required for those votes, not more than simple. But, that's why you need to do it. One of the things that really impressed me, and I think maybe you ought to know more about this, I visited for a long time this afternoon with your engineer, and the condition of your system is really in need of, in my mind, to be honest with you, it looks to me like it is so undersized and kind of a pitiful thing of years and years of trying to make this work for another year or so. You really have a situation here that you need a major rebuild. And this plan that he has here from 2017, it is a major rebuild if you build the whole thing. And it's got to be updated to what you need now. Did I mention this site at the top of it, at the high point from the ballot? We're lucky that the president of this board got that site for the city of Kimberly City. And I don't know whether he had this water district in mind, but we talked to them, and we believe that probably something can be arranged for a tower to be placed there. And that will permit present improvements for now as well as in the future. But you're gonna have to make this decision how much to make the bond for, whether you try to limit it to what you're gonna build now, or whether you want to get the authority for what is gonna be needed if you go to phase 2 and try to expand in Kimberly City. Now, one of the things that we learned today that was really disturbing is that the major service that this district provides is not to business entities. Business entities are not well served by our system. They're not within the district. And the business entities that need the service would take an extension of the boundaries of the district to do it. And so your phase 2 or 3 would probably be incorporate an extension into other parts of Kimberly City that want service, particularly business areas and the areas that are developing for business that need massive amounts of water but don't have it downstream for a phase 2 or a phase 3. So when you talk about this bond issue, it may be really foolish to expose yourself to yet another year's delay when it comes time that you decide that you want to go with a phase 2 or a phase 3. So it really makes sense if all of that is in your mind, and in a situation where the availability of grant money is so doubtful as it is today. Now, I personally think they'll be very generous. They've been providing grant money very, very generously in the past 10 years. And I think that we probably will be successful, but at the moment, there are absolutely no guarantees from the lending agencies about whether grant money will be available or not.
Now, if we go into phase 2 and 3, does that require a vote from the citizens who are not in to expand into that area?
To expand requires a vote of the entire district, yes.
So you can go plan that for
But that's not a bond. That's not a bond.
Right, that doesn't go.
Yeah,
That's just going into one
That's
of
an
that.
extension, yeah.
So Jerry, I guess my question is, we do have the 2017 study. I know it'd be ideal to completely revamp and do a whole new study, but realistically, to get an idea of where we need to be, we're talking, if the 2017 needs are still needed today, we're looking at $6 million.
Or nearly 7, I understand.
What do you feel the cost to revamp or use the existing study to create a new study would cost the water district?
I think it's probably in the $30,000 range, because I think we'll be want to do is fine tune it to really get a clear pathway forward as far as making sure that the land that we're talking about for new well and power be secured and going through that legwork to do that. Perhaps looking at some scenarios for what a future expansion might entail, future expansion of the addition boundaries might entail, and what fire protection in certain areas, certain businesses might look like. Those are things that we're able to get into those weeds when we get the report before. Also, the report's got enough age on it that in order to submit it to funding agencies for any kind of loan and grant consideration, they're gonna wanna see something that's newer than 7 years old. So they can expect something that's updated, so a lot of the effort, the first report's gonna have to be repeated with recent data. But I think that's something that, I've been updating some reports for towns that kind of fell into the same boat, and $30,000 is where they come in at.
There's a good explanation that you may not be aware of, but even when DNR approves a construction plan, they will not permit you to build it unless you build it within 3 years. The plan is void and their prior approval ends after 3 years. So that gives you an idea of when at least the government believes that you're so far out of date that you shouldn't rely on the engineering. And so you're, 5 years, 6 years on this plan. The engineer is not looking you for another fee. The engineer is being practical because there's extremely high likelihood that if you were to send this in with a date on it, that they reject it. And he really needs to redo it to be sure that it's up to date if we expect to get financing. And there's another problem in that the engineer's got to do all this work before we'll have the bond issue passed. So he doesn't know whether we're going to be able to build it or not. So we're going to have to find the funds to pay for this preliminary study by the engineering because he's got to pay his help to do this. So you need to be aware of that. If your election fails, you can run an election again. You can run it for more or for less than you do in this election. There's no restriction about that. But you've really got a tough decision. And very frankly, it's that district that I talked to you about, that sewer district that voted $20 million, we're on phase 6 for that. We're adding water to the whole north end of the Lake of the Ozarks. Public sewer service, so it isn't dumped in the lake anymore. That's on that ear on the top of the lake, back up in the Gravois area. But because they voted $20 million instead of the $2.5 million for the first project, they're able to go again and again and again and add more and more people that need service. So there is a real argument for doing a $10 or a $15 million bond issue, but you may scare voters to death unless it's explained to them that this is a 20-year arrangement. But it takes so long to do the engineering and it took so long to get government approval on it. It really, when I think about what we're accomplishing up there in the Lake of the Ozarks on that Gravois sewer district, it just amazes me where we're really cleaning up that end of the lake with the sewer district. And here you need water, maybe sewers too, I don't know.
Can you clarify, you said that the engineering study would have to be done before the bond issue went to election?
Well, he needs to get it done and get in an application, but they aren't going to approve anything unless we have authority to borrow money, whatever we have to borrow. Now, there is the grant money that we hope for, and we hope that if you get a $7 million project, we sure hope that $33.5 million is grant money, but we can't guarantee it because right now they don't know anything. See, the grant money is only authorized by Congress once a year. I guess I should, don't let me offend anybody, my son's running for Congress, and I hope he wins so he can help us.
I guess I just don't understand. You'd said 1 to 2 years before construction could start, because it would take a year to get that most companies take a year to get the engineering study done, but yet it's going in November, so I
We've
just.
got to have the election to authorize borrowing by November.
Got
The engineer's gonna get his plans available and go through that phase of getting DNR to approve it, which will be 3 months at least, 2 months at least, usually 60 days minimum.
The bond issue, the bond question going to the public would give us the authorization to borrow money when the project's completed, when we apply for the grant money. We'd have matching funds at that
But the
point.
engineering study doesn't have to be done before the election.
No,
Okay.
he's just saying that we
Okay.
need to start on that now, so we're not
Okay.
behind track by the time we do get the bond issue.
Okay.
So,
And that's up to the board. If the board wants to wait, and have the study done later, the board can do that. But the board's gotta make the decision about when the election, is to be held. And nobody's told me to make it one day or another. I recommended one, retreated from it because it was far off. I thought it'd be a good idea to throw it out, let everybody talk about it for a year. That was a stupid idea with the inflation. I've realized and woke up about it, and I'm recommending that we set it up sooner to the November election, which we could do. It's the first election now that we can get it on, where it has the possibility of being the only thing on the ballot.
well, the November election would be a presidential election, wouldn't it?
Huh?
Isn't the November election presidential?
Presidential, it'll be a lot of us.
There's a lot of people there.
No, it's a different, it's not the same date, it's something, it's not the same.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
Yes, it'd be a different date, you're absolutely right.
I'm so sorry, folks. I'm talking, I've got too many of these going, I
I was
apologize.
gonna say, I thought we were talking about
We're set
February.
up for the February 4th election. This document is what I recommend. That's the one. There are only 4 times a year that you can do it, and that's the municipal election. Which you'll have an opportunity to have on the ballot.
Is there an election in February?
So, yeah, it'd be February 4th, 2025.
Wait a minute. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay, so, did you have a question? Okay. So looking at preliminary estimates of $6 million to do what we highlighted in 2017 of the current dollar amounts, and the possibility of possibly a second phase where we would work with the business district about possibility of fire flow. You know, I would say that the reasonable amount to ask for the bond issue would be $10 million. My other question would be, what is our estimated cost to put this on the ballot? To go through the bond issue, to have a place on the ballot? What are we looking at from a water district's expense to do that?
We'd have to ask the county clerk what they'll charge, but see, part of the problem is that the election authority, who is the county clerk, can have a consolidated voting place, or they can have, numerous places to vote. And you're gonna have judges and clerks at each polling place. And depending, we can request that they consolidate polling places to bring that cost down. The ballots have to be formally printed, and the election has to be advertised. And the cost of the advertising and the cost of the ballots have to be assessed against the district. We can hold down the cost a little bit, but you can't control it. And to find out precisely what you're supposed to, we'll have to go to the county clerk and let them make an estimate of what they're willing to do and what the cost would be. It's not expensive, but it's not outrageous either.
So it looks like in order to get on the February ballot, we would have to have our paperwork in by close to the end of November of 2024 to get on the 2025 February ballot. my thing is voting on something, I'm all about this, and I think we should probably look at the $10 million bond issue so that we have the ability to not only complete phase one, but, any future planning, the authorization would be there to extend or expand, or, you know, our intentions, for future boards after us. But my question would be, I wanna know, since we're gonna put this on the ballot, we don't know 100% if it's gonna pass, what the costs are gonna be for that. I'd like to see from the county what it's gonna cost to put this on the ballot. Do we have does anybody have any rough idea on what it would cost? I mean, we can call the county tomorrow, but anybody have any ballpark? Are we talking $5,000? Are we talking, I mean, do we have any clue as to where that might fall?
It should be less than 5.
What you guys' opinion?
I agree with the 10 million.
James?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure everything's safe and it's not a bad.
President, let me mention
Sure.
that if the engineer is able to, if we're able to get grant money for the project, this might handle phase 2 and 3 and 4, the way you're talking. But it's gonna have to be explained to the public that you're looking at trying to finance improvements that may or may not be needed over the next probably 10 years. And if you're lucky and are able to get sufficient grant money, it would be marvelous to have that authority. Your board has to authorize any construction. You're gonna have to look at what the rates will be for the customers, when you do it. And you're gonna have to be sure that it's palatable to do what you're planning to do. But there's a huge need for adequate water supply, public water supply here. And Kimberly City has a number of businesses coming in, and current businesses are not served. And it appears that you really need to consider going to phase 2. And because you don't have any dividends to pay or taxes to pay, and because you're available, you can get your grants, and because you can borrow for less money, I challenge any private company to take a posture that they can do it for less than you can. This water district is the answer, in my opinion, in Kimberly City, and I represent a huge number of them that are successful.
You're gonna be on the board starting the next meeting. Do you have an opinion on the bond issue, or do you need more information?
Well, I do need more information, definitely, but I would say right now, I think you really should look at a minimum of 12 million for flush. I mean, just hearing what I'm hearing, I mean, I can see the numbers are ballooning, and, but with 2022 and 2023 behind us with inflation that's happened, I think the costs are going to be a little bit higher than everyone's anticipated. Yeah, you're not committed, it's just.
Right. It's just authorization to borrow up to that amount.
Right.
I got a nickel coat for my wife who's in the hospital yesterday, that cost $1.60 at McDonald's. And that's a small coat. They were a nickel when I quit.
Terry, how long before you can get that 2017 update? Would it take? I'm just trying to get a time.
Yeah, I'm thinking based on current workload, and maybe you just get another engineer hired, and, I think that's something that we can do over the summer here, and have something, have those discussions that I mentioned accomplished, and have a clear path forward and everything, before November, such that at your November meeting, you'll have everything laid out.
So it would be before the election.
Before you.
So we have an idea, or
It would be, right before you,
The election would be,
language
the
on
election would be in
right,
February.
right, to be on the ballot.
Yeah,
Okay.
we could meet that deadline, and that would segue well, as far as what we're doing here, what needs to be done, how long it takes to do those things, and then still
And
have
you
it
said
all figured out.
approximately 30, do that?
Yeah,
Jerry, is it possible by the next meeting you can have an estimate for us for that, a proposal for updating that?
Sure, I can, yeah. And the next meeting is coming up here, oh, okay, our meeting's now fourth Monday of the month? No,
At
longer.
at 7 p.m.
Okay, this is a regular meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. Special meeting or not? Oh, yeah, I'm gonna play it.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
So you guys both said, you know, the 10 million, our new board member, if you don't mind me asking, what's your background?
It's varied. I spent 15 years doing film and television as a producer. I'm on the business side of things. And when I also did the VIP services for Disney World for a while. When I came out here to Kimberly City, I've been in Kimberly City now for 20 years. My daughter was 16 years old and she was accepted to the College of the Ozarks. That's what brought me here.
Gotcha.
So the past 20 years, or 17 years, because I retired, I was a manager for the Meyer Hotels in Branson,
Okay.
managing several other hotels.
So you have some insight as to, you know, starting a project and realizing the cost run up and things of that sort.
Yes.
So our newest member of the board did recommend that, you know, that he would shoot for the 12 million versus the 10 million. For me, the 10 million seemed like a nice round number, gives us 4 million buffer zone for possible, additional improvements in the system down the road with the authorization, for future boards to be able to borrow that money. I'm still kind of leaning on the 10 million for now. If we take another project that extends beyond that, down the road, the future board could go back through this process again. When we talk about costly expense, if we're looking at, you know, around the $5,000 to get it on the ballot and get it put out there, I don't see that as a major expense down the road to you know, go through this process again. But I think 10 million gives us the financial ability to borrow for this project. We hope that we get the grants, and that comes in significantly lower than that, than the 6 million. And that will allow for that borrowing ability down the road for future boards. So,
You know, we got the 30,000 for the
right, yeah, which we'll have to see the actual charges for that at the next meeting and make a decision to approve that. Yeah.
35,000.
Yes.
Bell.
Mr. President, the resolution needs to be read in full. And when you get around to it, decide it. I'll be glad to read it for you if you like, when you figure out what you want. You probably should tell me and get the vote by your board as to what number there is.
I think for the purposes of this bond issue, we should go with the $10 million bond.
And you want to use that number for the reading? Then you're going to need a motion.
No, they didn't motion.
You're going to need a motion to adopt the bond resolution.
I'll make a motion.
Need a second.
Motion's been made and seconded.
And you need to vote by ayes or nays. So if you're a director of this district, say aye or nay when you're called on.
Okay.
Name call.
James?
Let me ask a question, is, we have a vote, which is legitimate.
That'd be Mr. McCaffrey. Does he get a vote since we voted him in as a board member now?
Well, he hasn't been sworn in yet.
Okay.
Right, and I would tell you, I would respectively abstain.
Because you don't have all the
Because I
information.
don't have a lot of information.
I just want to do it.
I could swear you in. I am a notary. If you want to be seated on the board tonight, if you want to be.
We have a quorum, so it's not necessary. So if you want to get up to speed before you make decisions like that, that's fine.
That's fine, we can wait till the next.
I think it's a good idea to wait, make sure all of the appointment and stuff is done properly.
Okay, Amanda, you can call out the vote again.
Okay, James?
Aye.
Letty?
Aye.
And Jason?
Aye.
And that, President Board votes.
Is it?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
resolution is complete, and you have the number, what you use, 10 million?
Yeah,
All right, now you need a motion to adopt, adopt the resolution, and before you vote on it, we need to read it in full.
yeah, make a motion to adopt the resolution as written.
I will make a motion to adopt the resolution as written.
Motion been made and seconded. And we read it before we vote, correct?
Yes, sir, and if you direct me to read it for the board, I'll be glad to do so.
Yes, please do.
A resolution calling an election on a revenue bond question in Public Water Supply District Number 1 of Stone County, Missouri. Be it resolved by the Board of Directors of Public Water Supply District Number 1 of Stone County, Missouri as follows. Section 1. The board finds it necessary and hereby declares its intent to borrow $10 million for the purposes of extending and improving the waterworks system of the district, including acquiring land and rights-of-way project, and to evidence such borrowing by the issuance of waterworks system revenue bonds, the bonds of the district in the amount of $10 million. Section 2. A bond election is hereby ordered to be held in Public Water Supply District Number 1 of Stone County, Missouri on Tuesday, February 4, 2025, on the following question. Question. Shall Public Water Supply District Number 1 of Stone County, Missouri issue its water work system revenue bonds in the amount of $10 million for the purpose of extending and improving the waterworks system of the district, including acquiring land and rights-of-way, the cost of operation and maintenance of said waterworks system, and the principal of and interest on said revenue bonds be payable solely from the revenues derived by the district from the operation of this waterworks system, including all future improvements and extensions thereof. The authorization of the bonds will authorize the district to fix, establish, maintain, and collect rates and charges for the services provided by the district through its waterworks system, including all extensions and improvements thereto hereafter constructed or required by the district. In addition to the other rates and charges for such services provided by law as will produce income and revenues sufficient to provide funds to pay the costs of operation and maintenance of said waterworks system and the principal and interest on the bonds as they become due, and to provide for establishment of reasonable reserves therefore. Section 3. The form of notice of election showing said question, a copy of which is attached hereto, and made a part hereof is hereby approved. And that's a standard notice of election. Anybody's welcome to see it, but it's what the clerk has to provide for it, for election, for the election commission. 4. Section 4. The district is hereby authorized and directed to notify the county clerk of Stone County, Missouri of the passage of this resolution no later than 5 p.m. on Tuesday, November 26th, and to include, or 24th, excuse me. That's immediately. And to include said in said notification all of the terms and provisions required by Chapter 115 RS law as amended. That's the Missouri election law. Section 5. The district expects to make expenditures on or after the date of passage of this resolution in connection with the project, and the district intends to reimburse itself for such expenditures with the proceeds of the bonds. The maximum principal amount of the bonds expected to be issued for the project is $10 million. Section 6. The district hereby engages the firm of Gilmore & Bell, P.C., Kansas City, Missouri, as bond counsel of the district with respect to the bonds. A bond counsel opinion is required by the federal government for all loans. Section 7. The resolution shall be in full force and effect from and after its passage. Passed by the board of directors, this, and today's date will be entered there. The then bears the signature of the president, the corporate seal, and an attestation by the district attorney. And attached to it is a notification of the election authority, which is required under the election law, chapter 115. Tell the clerk to have the election on that date, and attached to that is the notice of, on election, that would be the ballot that would be used in the election.
So now we need a vote to approve the resolution, correct?
Yes, sir. With ayes and nays.
Amanda, you want to call it out again, please?
James,
Aye.
Lenny,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Mr. President, you're in a position to declare the resolution passed, approved, and adopted.
I do declare. Seeing no additional items on the agenda, we stand adjourned.